Right, we're going to look at realism now in general, so I'm going to try and do both left and right realism together. So we start with left realism. We know that on the left-hand side of the sociology seesaw, you get a more liberal approach. We generally look at it as associated with change and wanting to change society, and we've got to put theories like Marxism and feminism on here as well. So we know already that when it comes to left realism, we know that their thinking will align somewhat, perhaps, with this Marxist kind of point of view, this more socialist point of view. Now, we see Lee and Young as the main key writers for left realism, and what they're going to say is that crime is multifactorial. It's caused by three elements, okay, which will all have an impact on my individual. And those elements are relative deprivation, marginalisation, and the impact of subcultures. Now, obviously you're going to have to go through and look at these different areas and see what we're talking about, why relative deprivation is different to just deprivation itself, why relative deprivation has a greater impact, but also the links that we might see within this, looking at subcultures. In fact, it sounds quite similar to Cloud and Olin, and you could even draw some functionalist parallels here, despite the fact that functionalism usually sits on the other end of the spectrum. So, we've got marginalisation, groups being pushed to one side. We've got relative deprivation, groups being poorer than other groups in that community and deprived of certain things, and membership of subcultures and gangs. Now, that tells me something about official statistics and left realism. The same as it should do for anything, official statistics and realism is a big old tick, because they're going to explain why working class young men and ethnic minorities are more likely to fall into this group. So again, for any theory you're comparing to against this, you're going to at least pick one that thinks the official statistics aren't valid, because their explanations will explain why that group is most likely to commit a crime. We also see Lee, Young and Matthews, and talking about the square of crime. Now, remember, because we've got Jock Young there, who's a bit of an interactionist and a bit of a neo-Marxist, there's going to be some element of a kind of micro look at his theory, where we look at the encounters between the offender, the victim, the state and the public, okay? And the way that those four elements are going to interplay and affect each other. So it is quite useful to see the square of crime, and when you look at it in your books to revise, you will see a kind of micro level interplay between these elements, which is a good thing. It's a nice contribution to this theory. It's not just saying one thing's to blame the person, or one thing's to blame, the offender, one thing's to blame the victim, or it's the government that's to blame. They might suggest that there are more elements that are, that are responsible here, and that we can consider these from all different angles, right, of how they affect one another. But the key for left realism is that, just like right realism, it thinks statistics are valid and it wants to provide some practical solutions to crime. So for Jock Young, we see solutions like having better housing, more jobs, even less criminogenic areas of town, so areas where it looks nicer and it's more appealing. So things like this. We also want to work with other agencies, like religious agencies or the housing agency, or have a multi-agency approach to dealing with crime. So all of these things together will affect crime, because they'll all be able to affect how marginalised a person feels or how deprived a person feels. Certainly if they've got a job, right, they might not be as relatively deprived. Certainly if we've linked them up with the local church, they might not feel as marginalised. If you've got better housing, they might not need to join a gang because they're quite happy. So we can look at the different solutions to crime based on what they think the cause is. There's also actuarialism, if you remember, which is kind of like the insurance of finding which people are most likely to be at risk and trying to put in place some intervention so that they've got more support when they're bringing up their kids, or they've got some better way of dealing with teenagers if there's an issue with them. Troubled Children's Programme, or I think is one, I think that was the name of it. So we can see that on one side we've got set causes which are, yes, a lot of them are based in the structure of society, but a lot of them could be the way that individuals feel as well, which we see in this square of crime. When we look at, victim, offender, public, and state interplay, we can see that. And we've got some practical solutions, actuarialism, as well as these ones that Jock Young offers. Now, we're going to look at the right and we're going to see a totally different set of ideas here. Because the right are going to say things like there's biological reasons why people commit crime. They're going to say that crime is caused by the underclass, or that, the poor socialisation of single-parent households, or that crime is a rational choice. And you've got your key writers on there that are going to, Murray and Herrnstein, Wilson and Herrnstein, Murray and Clark, that are going to make those cases. And you can see that there is a big difference here. I draw a line there between the causes from both sides. They're not in agreement. The cause here is going to be very much the individual who is responsible. Over here, yeah, it might play some part, but the main part that's going to play is kind of like the structure of society. The poverty that people experience is going to be the issue. So we see that we're blaming two different things when we explore realism from both sides. We know the solutions are going to be different, because on this side we have the idea of broken windows. Now, if you remember, broken windows is Wilson and Kelling's idea that if you've got areas of the town which are, run down or graffitied or, vandalised, crime's going to breed there, because you're more likely to break the window of a building which has already got a broken window than break a fresh window in a building where there are no broken windows. And what we see is from that broken windows, we see policing styles like zero tolerance. Zero tolerance is going to develop from broken windows policing. Zero tolerance is going to develop from broken windows theory. And we're going to see this new style of policing. Now, we looked at its effectiveness in New York, where Zimring says, it lowers the murder rate by plus 80%, the murder rate drops. Because by targeting every single thing, we're now going to pick up on everybody who's littering. Everyone who's jaywalking is going to get a ticket. And by potentially stopping these, you stop the murders, the shootings, or the rapes. The horrible stuff you stop by stopping the little stuff. And you can see big difference between those two perspectives here, not only in the causes, but also in the solutions that they play. So in an essay, where you get either right realism or left realism, you know that you're going to be spending a good portion of that time comparing between the two, the contrasting ideas of what is the reason that we see crime exist, and also what the solutions are that they pose for crime. Because remember, for realists, solutions are very, very important. Now, obviously, the reason that solutions are important for anybody who's a realist is because realism is a lot more of a political kind of perspective than it is a sociological one. Okay? We understand that realism is closely associated with politics, and therefore, we get right realism sitting on the opposite side, on the more conservative side to left realism. So we know that the issue here is also very, very political, as opposed to just sociological, and that's a problem with the theories as a whole. But within them, there are lots and lots of evaluation. Certainly, the biggest thing is this. This side is very, very controversial, so there's lots of different evaluation there. But don't think that there's nothing that you can say that is negative for left realism as well. Particularly, you can have a big pop here at Jock Young. Jock Young's idea that all of a sudden he's bounced around from the different social theories and now he's writing for a left realist perspective. Well, in theory, Jock Young, you're a neo-Marxist, aren't you? We remember you from New Criminology. Surely the answer is not trying to change the structure slightly in society by more jobs and better housing. Surely the answer is communism. That'll get rid of crime. Well, that doesn't seem to have worked very effectively when we tried it, but that is a critique that you could throw at the left realist perspective. So lots and lots of potentially that you could say on here. And obviously, when you're comparing the realisms to the other theories, you know, go for the ones as well that are on the opposite side, but also always remember you've got this kind of view that they all have, that the official stats are accurate. So it's ignoring lots of corporate crime and ignoring the fact that the police who are enforcing it could be biased.